Hey guys, welcome to Be Cool, Be Smart. We're here in the Woodlands, Texas, and I have welcomed a couple of representatives that are running for candidate positions here in the state of Texas. I want to welcome Jay Stittleberg, who's running for county judge. And of course, I'm here introducing Ms. Lorena, amazing. She's running for House of Representative District 15. And then over here we have
Jason Rocha from the Woodlands Pride.
He is actually the founder, so amazing, first ever Woodlands Pride Parade to ever take place in north of Houston. And of course we have Miss Monica Roberts.
Hey Woodlands, how y'all doing?
She is one of the biggest advocates for the LGBT community. We have reached out to first being, hi everybody, hi Joanne. First being is we were going to have Ms. Valerie Swanson. And amazing lady, she's running Republican, but unfortunately she had an emergency to leave when she found out that one of our LGBT community leaders was here. So unfortunately we won't have her present at the show, but we will carry on. Hopefully, you know, I do have plenty of voting histories and information for all the candidates that are running for the state of Texas in different districts. So hopefully,
I think that gives everybody a voice, and it makes for a better government when you have some checks and balances.
Absolutely, and as we all know, our founding fathers, this government was founded by a bipartisanship, and in the north up here in Montgomery County and in Conroe area, out of 26 precincts, only one is a Democrat, so that's a big contrast. Lorena, what can you tell us about you? I know you went to Georgetown University Law, and you also taught there. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic, moved here in the early 90s, and went to school. Oh, hello, this is the camera. I'm so sorry. And went to school in Washington, D.C., where I lived for most of my life here in the United States, to Georgetown University Law Center. I was lucky enough to teach as an adjunct at Georgetown University as well. And I worked full-time at the Organization of American States, a public international organization that has as its members countries. And it has 34 member states that sit down around the table, and then one that hasn't occupied its seat for a while now. That would be Cuba. And I've worked there for 11 years, and there's actually where I learned that compromising is actually something that is achievable, and it is also something that's very hard to do sometimes, but it is achievable. That's, you know, perseverance.
So, talking about Cuba, it is considered, even though they don't call it, is considered a communist country. And Ted Cruz's father is from Cuba originally, and there has been some speculation about, Beto's names, which is Robert, and I'll be more than happy to respond that for you. Robert is the definitive name of the person, correct? But what happens whenever, you shorten a name, you give it prefixes, and that's what Beto is, and it sounds in Spanish. Ted is actually also a prefix, but his real name is actually Rafael Eduardo Cruz. So he goes by the name of Ted because it's a little long. And over here, which I find really interesting, is that I have voting records of a lot, as stated before, of a lot of candidates. For example, Beto Burke here says here that no public tax dollars should be given to private schools. And over here, Ted wishes to abolish the U.S. Department of Education. Now that should hit home to every American. Why? Because the founding fathers, the main concern was education, and actually didn't believe in privatizing education. They believed against corporations having ownership of education. Coming from a standpoint of, different demographics that we have here, and I wish I had the Republican candidate here, the conversation would have gone a lot differently. I wouldn't have touched these subjects, but let me ask you, when it comes to this subject, Jason. Sorry, guys. It threw me off. She left. It threw me off. I'm sorry. It threw me off. What do you want me to do? And I'm Mexican, and I like to use my hands, so I'm trying to, stay centered. What can you tell me about not just the education system and where it has brought you as a leader in the community as an LGBT, but also because we are a generation that has human rights, something that people didn't start having until the 60s, including women.
Yeah.
My grandmother would go to the local place to talk about, she was getting abused by her second husband, and they would call her husband and say, hey, come pick up your wife. So we all now have rights. What do you think about the education department in conjunction with also equal human rights for the LGBT community now that it has in the education community?
Yeah, I'll first touch on the education with our founding fathers. I'm a moderate independent, a very proud moderate independent. And actually education was created to teach positive nationalism, not what we know nationalism as it is today. It was to teach who we were as a new country and who we wanted to be moving forward. Obviously, years of corruption, centuries of corruption changed that completely. And so I think that's why some Republicans like the idea of abolishing it, although it doesn't, none of them made sense to me. They didn't have a true pulse on what was going on. And that's when I had to wake up to my political identity and not just shift to one side because that's how I was taught or raised. So my parents were definitely encouraging a more of a Tea Party upbringing, but we all broke the mold because they also supported an independent mind. So.
And I think that's very important, especially for being part of a community that, I learned a new terminology, pre-baby boomers, from Bruce, who was the Democratic Party president here in Montgomery, and it's really interesting to see that reality that we have people born since like the 30s, with our community still, and I think that's amazing. I mean, I hope I live to learn, that long in my life, but it also creates problems because some people don't want to let go of the past. And some people, even though they don't want to let go of the past, they want to get rid of what has created such an amazing nation. Monica, I mean, you form part of the community. You form part of what has made our economy so amazing as well because you contribute to the LGBT community. And the LGBT community gives such an amazing economic stance towards who we are today as well. There's business owners who are LGBT. What can you tell us what you've done and from what happened today, how can we work with local governments to try to come hand in hand with subjects that matter for everybody, including human rights?
Frankly, the only way that we're going to change what's going on right now is people have to vote tomorrow. And you have to vote in every election.
Amen.
But you also have to be an informed voter. Okay, because you do have, while I'm an unabashedly yellow dog Democrat and unapologetic about it, in large part because of life experiences, because frankly, the Republican Party, as an African American who is an unapologetic trans woman, we have seen voter suppression laws passed by Republicans specifically to suppress our ability to vote. And after you saw what black women did predominantly in Virginia and in Alabama, they have good reason to be scared. Also in Harris County alone, just the the early voting total was 885,000 voters, which is an astounding amount for a midterm election, and it nearly matched our total vote in the 2016 election, where we flipped most of the county. And we're on the verge with this total. I think we're going to have a very good night tomorrow. I'm hoping that we do. But bringing it back to the LGBT portion of it, it's for those of us who are not persons of color in that community, our reality is slightly different from our white counterparts. While some of them may be doing quite well financially, a lot of us aren't. and especially in the trans community, according to the U.S. Trans Survey that was put out in 2015, African American trans people are facing 20% unemployment. For the Latinx community, that's 15%.
And we're going to make sure that all those numbers actually get put on our website and all our live feeds. It won't be right now, but it'll be a little later.
US trend.
Continue. We want to make sure that it's not just what we say, but we're actually going to be posting these things. But please carry on.
Yeah, but and we're also looking at the fact that just recently the Trump administration has been putting together, let's say, policies that are basically designed to erase trans folks from public society, and pushed by by evangelical Christians, by the Republican Party itself, who has anti-trans planks in their platform. Not only in the Texas Republican Party platform, but also the national one. So, if I'm as a person of color in the LGBTQ community, and looking at this from my perspective, it makes no sense for me to vote for my oppressor.
Sure. So basically what we're talking about is, and discussing, and more importantly, I'm going to actually give you some votes that were done, yay and nays. That not just, I don't want to just focus on just, because there are groups of people that unfortunately are marginalized, but it doesn't just affect people who are marginalized, it affects everybody. For example, Mr. Kino, who's going to run for county judge, wants to raise property taxes, right? He voted for raising property taxes?
Well, he did as a state legislator.
Right, in the House, right? Right. And then, of course, we have the subject of one group of people, which is vote in favor of the bathroom bill, which is great. Not for everybody, it's great for some people, but not for some people, right? And then we have diverting education funds, which that also affects everybody, not just a group of people, which was done by Robert Nichols, who's a Republican. And then we have Democrats who advocates for closing loopholes for corporations not to have access to the money of the kids for the education of the children. We have other votes here who says here, which is really important for Texan women who carry a heritage in the state of Texas. So apparently, it happens to be George P. Bush. I've never met him, but he removed the Daughters of the Republic of Texas and took full restoration control. What can you say about that?
Well, I think that I'm not well versed on George P. Bush, I can tell you that.
Son of Jib.
But as a Texan, who here is a Texan?
I am. I'm a native Texan.
Are you a native Texan?
I am a native Texan.
I'm a transplant.
I guess I'm triple transplant here.
I've been instructed to say I got here as quickly as I could.
Perfect.
Well, what I will point out in terms of what you were talking about earlier in terms of SB 6, it also had a hidden purpose of wiping out the ability of Texas cities to write non-discrimination law. In other words, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, El Paso, and Houston up until November of 2015 had non-discrimination laws that protected people on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. They've just filed, the U.S. Pastors Council has just filed a lawsuit in Austin trying to overturn their non-discrimination ordinance. And we all know the story of Hero, the big, bad, and ugly story of Hero. But it also points out the fact of why stuff mattered. And Ms. Swanson, by the way, was one of the people as part of the Freedom Caucus who helped push SB 4 and SB 6. Was a supporter of that, which is probably why she ran out of here, having to face one of us. So
as we all know, in this country, human rights is very important. We're the #1 advocate of human rights in the world. And not only human rights is important, but I think sometimes when one subject gets put in highlight, we forget about everything else, and we forget about everything that affects the community, from county judges who do the taxes to state representatives. For example, the governor that gets chosen, it's going to depend how the taxes go for the parents and their property taxes, correct?
Certainly it could. I think that, my 2 cents on the governor and the lieutenant governor's race, truthfully, is, the reality in the state of Texas is the lieutenant governor is the man with power, or woman. I mean, that is the position of power in Texas. It's not the governor.
Yeah.
The governor has veto power, but the reality is the lieutenant governor controls the legislation. And that's where these, bills you're talking about come into play. And I can tell you things like the bathroom bill. I mean, these have been happening all around the country for several years. And truth be told, there was never an issue to begin with that ever required a bathroom bill. In my humble opinion, it's distractionary politics because it takes our attention away from what's going on behind the scenes. And that's really the purpose of these bathroom bills and bills of the nature that. Because everyone has to recognize the fact that bills like that are detrimental to our economy. Businesses, by far, don't appreciate or like any kind of bills like that. If they're thinking about moving their headquarters or opening a new factory or whatever it is, they're not going to go to a state that has laws like that because they're not going to subject their employees to it. So, we have to recognize these things, and quite honestly, we have to put it out there what the truth is in the public spectrum, that these bills are used as distractions. They're nothing else.
So right here I have Mr. Matt Collier, who's running for lieutenant governor, and we have also Dan Patrick, who's running for lieutenant government, and that is the same length as a presidency, 4-year term. Basically here we have on education, which refuses to raise teachers' pays, and it says here that money should be set aside for salaries by reducing other expenditures. And also it supports school choice and private school vouchers paid by taxpayers. Basically what that means is that money gets taken out of the school. It no longer belongs to the school, and it'll be given privately to every parent. And that's impossible because, every year since I was a kid, I remember schools had a budget and it covered everybody. So how are they supposed to know 300 million families of where that money is going to go, right? We've had it very organized, and I think it's worked for many decades. So I don't understand how that's going to work. But if you vote for those values, it's great. If you think and you believe in that, then I encourage you to vote on that. If you don't do it. Mike Collier strongly opposes high stakes and testing and vouchers. Those are the vouchers that I'm talking to you about, which is the bill that's part of 610, right? HB 610.
I believe
the
so.
House Bill 610. Yeah, and also supports affordable higher education tuition. One of my teachers in high school actually was really upset recently. I love him. He's like my French teacher, amazing teacher. He's crazy, but good crazy. Good crazy. And I remember I saw a comment about him, and this is in another state across the United States. He said that not the principal, but the director was getting I guess a huge thousands worth of raise, and teachers weren't getting raises. Instead, they're getting reduced. So we know the economic impact, right? What happens, as you've graduated high school, you've served our country.
I'm a teacher's kid.
And you're exactly. So, and you've taught. So, what are the number one concerns of teachers? It's the salary that matters. Everything is becoming more expensive, but salaries are decreasing. And I don't think, it doesn't matter what I think. But tell me, what would you do as a state representative to try to help teachers, encourage the education department, the influences of the education department, like either Dan Patrick or Mike Collier, to be able to encourage better teaching, so teachers do a better job, so they don't feel unappreciated.
Where do I start?
Oh God!
Let's see.
Whatever you prefer.
I can. Yeah, and
With
I got some
teachers,
questions
let's start
too.
with the fact that that teachers in Texas do not collect Social Security. They do have this special retirement program that's called the TRS, the Teachers Retirement System. And the teacher retirement system has been decimated, just basically year after year after year, in terms of how it has been managed. And hello everyone again. I keep forgetting it. I keep looking at you.
No, don't worry. I do that all the time.
But the way that it's been done is that it keeps getting decimated every year. there's another element to it, and it is the system of the recapture system that we have in Texas, which is the product of a law, which is the calls for the Robin Hood Fund, which is a special fund where the independent school districts that are doing fairly well are labeled so that they actually have to give back to Austin in terms of
like HISD.
what's called a recapture, so that Austin can give back to other independent school districts that are not doing as well. Except that that formula was put together back in the 90s and has never been updated. So it's a very archaic formula, and what effectively is happening right now, and we saw it at Houston ISD, one of our independent school districts right around us, is that they're about to go belly up because they cannot afford the amount of money that they need to send back to Austin in terms of recapture money and continue to be functioning. So,
And we have to clarify, right? Austin is the capital, so that's why the money's
is
getting
the
sent
capital,
back.
yeah.
So basically, the reason why the money is being sent back to Austin, right, is because that's where all the money gets managed.
And you tell me, what incentive does anyone have to join the forces in becoming a teacher here in Texas? Here in Conroe ISD, we have been blessed, and I have to actually make that parenthesis because it is true. For decades, we have had a wonderful administration that has been good enough so that our taxes, our property taxes, because usually what ends up happening is that the state is not giving as much money as it should be giving to public education, and the localities end up paying what they need to put for public education in terms of property taxes. And we have been blessed enough here at Conroe ISD that we have not had our taxes go exponentially higher, property taxes. But something's going to give, and it is going to give sooner rather than later. And that was actually one of my concerns. And when I finally figured out, well, the little bit that I could figure out of how exactly the recapture system works and what is the Robin Hood Fund, etc., I said, well, somebody has to go to Austin and try to fix the problem before it breaks, you know, before it is too late, because that's what's been happening in other parts in the state of Texas, and that's how Texas is now 38th in terms of public education.
42nd.
42nd.
Yeah,
And
42nd.
Yeah.
And the Republicans
And
have also been cutting the education budget for the last several sessions. For starters, been cutting billions out of the education budget. In large part because they do not like public education, which is why they're trying to push this voucher system, which as a teacher's kid, I'm totally opposed to. If you want to send your kid to a private school, that's on you. But tax dollars that are supposed to go to public education should not be pulled out of the public education budget to be funding, say, vouchers, much less charter schools.
Yeah.
I don't like charter schools either, because charter schools, for in large part, are getting public education money from the district. Yeah, they're subsidized.
Yeah.
And they get to pick and choose their kids. They don't have to serve everybody like public education and districts like Conroe, like HISD, and other districts have to take everybody. That means special education kids. That means kids who are gifted. That means kids who are not, that have to struggle a little bit, maybe, and may need a little extra attention. Because also you're also looking at class sizes. Class sizes impact educational outcomes, and also these high stakes testing, where you're basing, let's say, whether a school gets additional funding based on the grades and stuff from from one high stakes test. That's a problem. Especially if you have like magnet schools like we have in HISD, where the best students are pulled from neighborhood schools to go to these magnet schools, and the neighborhood schools that are left behind have the kids that couldn't qualify for, didn't qualify for magnet.
So to back up some of these things, I think facts are just very important, and I like to say, hashtag Google it. Just Google it, because it's all out there.
If I may interrupt you for just a second, one of the things that I have found is that the big discussion between public versus private education and whether or not we should be paying for, for the public education when my kids are going to private schools, that is an issue that doesn't know any boundaries when it comes to politics. Because I have some Democratic friends who also say the same thing. Why do I have to pay for the public education of other kids when I am actually not using the public schools?
Because those
why
kids,
is it? Yeah,
because
why
those
is
kids
it,
will be 20 years from
Thank
now
you.
will be
Yeah.
your workforce.
Yeah. And why is it that when I don't have any kids, I have to pay for the public education of somebody else? And when I tell my Democratic and Republican friends who come up with that argument, I say, well, we do pay for roads, and there are many roads that you have never transited, yet you still are paying for that. So
I've never even
So-
thought about that. Like paying where the taxes go, and I just do my duty. Pay your taxes.
So over here, Jay Stittleberg, for like you're gonna be in charge of a lot of taxes. Are you like if you get chosen, are you also in charge of education taxes?
Yeah, no. The county government doesn't have any control of how the ISDs tax.
It's a state.
Well, the ISDs themselves set tax rates locally. So here's what happens. First of all, we have to recognize that public education is not a political or partisan issue. Public education is an American issue.
Yes.
And we have to understand that good public education and an educated citizenry is what makes our country excel. It's what makes our economy grow. And we have to recognize that, and we need to elect people that understand that public education is not a partisan issue. Because the state has, they used to fund at least 50% of public education, and here's what happens. Texas used to fund at least 50% of public education. The remainder was put on the burden of the tax, the property taxes, citizens. Well, what happened is now they only fund about 36 or 38%. Well, that gap is made up by us as homeowners and business owners. So what happens is the ISDs come in and they raise, they increase your property taxes. And if you actually read the state budgets, which I've said many times over the past 10 years, it mandates increases in property taxes for the ISDs, which really goes across the board, because what they're really mandate is an increase in your assessment, which affects every taxing entity that you get. So, and that's where the county comes into play, right? The county's portion of your property taxes is probably 12 plus or minus 2 or 3%. The ISD's portion of your property taxes is 52 plus or minus 3% of what you pay. So the only way we're going to get tax relief is when we fix Austin and we increase the amount of education funding to public education. That is what's going to be able to relieve the tax burden on homeowners and business owners. So unfortunately, the county doesn't have any control of that, but we can certainly be advocates for it because we understand what the issue is.
Of course.
And we have to recognize what needs to be done with public education.
So I have a couple of facts, and the hashtag Google it. I encourage you to Google it. And you can find it all in texas.gov and congress.gov, which is where all the voting is and where all the budgets have been passed and approved by whichever candidate or official in the past. Here, Mr. Greg Abbott, who's Republican governor, is running for governor. And then we have Lupe Valdez, who's also running for governor. Greg Abbott, and this can, again, Google it. It can be found on congress.gov that he cut $5 billion plus in Texas public school fundings without warning to legislators. That apparently, if I'm wrong, I'll ask a constitutional attorney, but it's a violation of the Constitution. Public education taxes rose while the state's share of public education fell, which that's fairly important. We were ranked, not 42nd, sorry, 41st, which is just one spot up. And then he also killed the House-led effort to increase state school fundings of school by $1.8 billion, which that's a lot of money. Maybe if that House-led effort to increase state funding, got cut, I think it would be, important for you guys to consider what you guys really want for the future of your children. Majority of the time why people come to this country is because of education. You know, this education system here is amazing, and it's kind of fallen downwards because when I graduated for high school, my high school was like a college. So I felt like I was in a college. I just didn't take advantage of it. I encourage every single high schooler, please take advantage of your high school because college is so expensive. And of course, you know, if you believe that you should cut education, I mean, I'm just, you know, I guess I have something to say to parents, you know, start looking for private schools next year, you know. Hopefully, if you believe in closing public educations, then I encourage, you know, early looking for private education. Why? And I want to ask you, I don't know if you guys are aware of this bill or not. What do you guys think of H.R. 899, which was passed, which was introduced, and it still hasn't passed the House yet into the Senate? It says that the Education Department will terminate in December 31st, 2018. And it's sitting also with H.R. 610. It's still in the same department. What do you guys think about that? It was actually co-sponsored by, well, only Republicans. What do you have to say about that, Lorena?
You put me on the spot. I did not do my homework before I got here regarding HR 99.
899. HR 899.
899.
Google it.
One thing, yeah, I know. Hashtag Google it. Right?
Yeah.
But one thing I'm going to tell you, when you see that there is a bill that has only one side, that it's kind of lopsided, then just look at maybe a trend that's going on one of the sides, and that probably is not going to make it too far.
What do you think about this? What do you think about that bill?
Well, again, I don't know. I haven't read the bill. I don't know what it says.
There isn't anything but
But
the Department of Education will terminate.
But first of all, you know, any bill that has to do with education, if it's only being sponsored by one side of the political aisle, then there's obviously an issue with it.
Yeah.
You know, just like I said, you know, we shouldn't bring partisan politics into public education.
But
The other thing
the
I will
reality
tell you-
is we do have, you say partisan, the reality is like a lot of issues over the last 20 years or so, they have become partisan, you know, stuff that should be bipartisan, even diplomacy has become a partisan issue. And education is definitely one of those. Now, as far as the Department of Education being messed with, okay, that has impacts on a local level because, you know, for example, we in trans community under the previous administration, under the Obama administration, we were getting rulings that would allow us to go through the Department of Education to put, you know, districts that wouldn't allow trans students to, you know, either present as themselves on campus or even use the bathrooms that matched their presentation. We at least had relief through the Department of Education. Now that Betsy DeVos is the head of is the Secretary of Education, and she is an avid fan of private schools and has never attended a public school in her life. She's now rescinding a lot of those protections that were put in under the Obama administration, and that's a problem. Okay, the Department of Education also, at the collegiate level, when you have sexual assaults under VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, most of that was tracked. Those statistics were tracked by the Department of Education. That's not. Betsy DeVos wants to change the definitions to make it less likely for those complaints to be heard. Much less, yeah. So
Jason, being bipartisan.
That's why I'm quiet.
Yeah, bipartisan. Being bipartisan, I have a couple of things I want to say apart from the previous gentleman who I spoke about in regards to education, who cut billions in this actual funding for education, which I think is the most important thing. The reason why I think education is very important is because eventually the baby boomers are going to have to hand down the keys to somebody, right? And then the people after the baby boomers are going to have to hand down. And then, one day I'll be, older and I'm going to have to hand something down, right? So I'm going to read you a couple of more people who have education backgrounds, and that's Todd Litton, who supports early child education and supports high-quality child care after school and summer programs, who's Democrat. Whereas Daniel Crenshaw supports school choice, and again, that goes back to the bill that we spoke earlier about, opposes the Department of Education and supports vocational apprenticeship programs. Then we have over here, and they both are running, Todd and Daniel are running for U.S. Congress District 2. State House Representative District 15, which is Lorena Perez and Stephen Toth. Stephen, well, I'll start with Lorena. She supports, she's here, so I have to give her the podium.
That's
She
right.
supports increased teacher compensation, supports equal access and resources of children with disabilities, advocates reducing the state's emphasis of arbitrary standardized tests, and believes that no public tax dollars should go to vouchers of private schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So basically what that means, your money won't go to private schools. It stays in your local, state, city,
schools.
public government schools. Whereas Stephen Troth wants to eliminate the core curriculum, which is another word for eliminating the education system, because it's too liberal. And I don't like getting into liberal slash conservative because that deviates away from the actual subject. It's like, oh, well, because, this person's liberal, I'm not going to vote for him, or because this person is not liberal, I'm not going to vote for him. I want to stay on the subject of the education system, of the future of the children and all the kids. I mean, if you're against abortion, your kids are going to have to go to a school. So that means there's going to be like millennial boomers, you know what I mean? So what can you tell me about that, since you're right in the middle? Like, what do you think about that?
Well, I think a lot of young people, millennials, and the generation after us, I'm on the tail end of the millennial movement.
Me too.
I think we really want balance, and I would say that a lot of independent people in this country, I think we're at over 40%
Yeah, you're right.
of
About
people
40%.
identify as independents now. And I think that the Democrats and Republicans are going to have to do a lot more than stick to their base. And we'll see that this time. We saw that in 2010. I kind of the start of that with, so many people talk about this current election tomorrow and how it's going to be this blue tsunami. Well, in 2010, Obama lost 63 seats in the House, and so this isn't the first time this has happened. This happens every midterm after during the first presidential run, and so I think the millennials really want that balance. And so even if I've never voted for a certain party before. Well, this time I did because I'm tired of being misrepresented, and I wanted that balance in my county. I wanted that balance in my government, and so on. And I think that we'll learn that. We'll continue to learn that, and independence will keep growing. Whether it's the education system, abortion, our candidates running, one day the D's and the R's won't be as relevant as just the person that you're running as and the positions that you stand for.
To borrow the words from Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend.
Well, that's true. It's decades away. But
When I was your age, one of the things that I said when I voted in my first presidential election in 1980, which was the Carter-Reagan one, both parties are going to compete for my vote and blah, 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 blah. And the reality turned out to be that only one party was competing for my vote and another party was busy trying to suppress it. And when over time in my 20s, as I'm looking at the societal, because this is during the Reagan era, and I'm looking at all these anti-black, anti-gay, anti-policies coming from a single party. And I'm looking at the other party that is basically fighting for my humanity and my human rights. That's what made me kind of come off of an independent stance to more of the dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. Are Democrats perfect? No. There are some Democrats I want to wring their necks on some stuff, but for the most part, I'd say I agree with you that our government works best. And I remember, and I grew up during a time period when we had bipartisan leadership across the aisle, like a John Tower, who was, one of our great senators. Even Kay Bailey Hutchinson, to a point, was, was a bipartisan leader. We had a lot of that back in the 70s and the 80s. It is just since the 90s and going, we have just had this increasing amount of hyper-partisanship that has infected American politics. And it also coincides with the rise of right-wing talk radio. It also coincides with the rise of Fox News, so that where we've got situations where everybody goes to their different news silos now. Those of us on the liberal progressive wing, we tend to watch MSNBC. Those folks on the right side of the aisle tend to let's say listen to Fox or to your right-wing talk radio stations. And we are getting more and more hardwired into our various bunkers. That is also a problem. And you're entitled to your opinions, but you are not entitled to your own set of facts. And that's what I love what Paola's trying to do here in terms of putting the facts out there, so that people can.
And it's all government facts. Government facts.
Yeah.
No, it's not CNN,
Yeah.
NBC, Fox.
Yeah.
It's nothing. It's pure government information.
Yeah.
And
that's what we need.
the reason why I had invited, two Republicans and two Democrats, the second one didn't make it.
She left.
No, the second one just didn't make
Oh,
it.
she didn't make it?
I wish she would have, because not because I'm trying to create a riot or a herd, or an argument, because I'm not here to do that. One of the things that I think really has the country divided is that one side of the media looks like it's Democratic, one side looks like it's Republican, and it's really a new terminology, because I don't ever remember growing up people saying the left and the right. Like, it was always just like bipartisanship. In fact, I met some officials in 2015, and they were very cool. Like, they were like, we're here. They were local government officials, and they're like, we're here to do jobs bipartisanly. And I think in the past 3 years, it's really important for children to know this, because in the past 3 years, it's really important for you guys to think about this. We now have newborns who are 3-year-olds who are 6, 9-year-olds who are teenagers, 16-year-olds who are 19, high school graduates who are now finishing college. So it's like this new generation that maybe see this world as a normality, which did not used to exist. And it's really important to protect the hearts of the children, because it broke my heart the other day that a friend of mine wrote on Facebook that she took her kid for her birthday. Well, the sister of my friend. She took her baby boy, he's like maybe 6 or 8, and for his birthday, and he walked into the building, and he said, "Mommy, is that guy gonna shoot us?" And that's not something I grew up, I grew up living.
I don't think that's necessarily to maybe be a more optimistic lens here. I don't think that's necessarily the sign of the times. I think that's just social media and the media. Like, we are over downloaded on information. And so when I was growing up, I mean, just in the 90s, we didn't have 100,000 cable channels. We didn't have social media, so I didn't know every bad thing that happened to everybody. But right now, we know every bad thing that happens to everybody. On your phone, you get CNN updates, Fox. You get all the updates, all right there.
Yeah.
And so it's always just negative, negative, negative. And so maybe the world isn't as bad. It's just the way
we're overstimulated.
But we're overstimulated, and everything.
Because we only had 3 TV stations when I was growing up in the 70s: ABC, CBS, and NBC. And then Fox came a little bit later. But
that's not to say that.
But I never remember growing up hearing about so many massacres.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
They happen.
The shooting
You know what I mean?
is a little bit different, but I think that it is more sad that we haven't come around to fixing these issues in such an advanced country, in such an advanced time, that we still have to deal with the same issues that we have been dealing with, but now we see them all the time.
Now, I'm not advocating for anti-Second Amendment, by the way, okay? I believe firmly in the Second Amendment, and I think a lot of Americans do. And I think that's one right that people need. Why? Because in a lot of governments around the world, the people who don't have that piece of property, you know, that keeps them safe in their home, even if nothing's ever going to happen, you have it, right? And in a lot of other countries, the reason why they're also so unsafe is because they don't have protection. And then when something bad happens, they don't have a way to protect from, you know, bad things that could happen, you know, if there was something bad to happen, right?
However, I would push back on that by saying that, okay, I grew up in neighborhoods where guns were easy to get, and far too often some argument starts up and one fool go grabs his gun and shoots the other one. I'm more of, while I agree with, while I have no problem with the Second Amendment, guns need to be regulated. You say your car has more regulations than buying a gun. That's a problem to me. Okay, and nobody should own an AR-15 or any other kind of military-style weapon. Period.
Well, where I was going with this, is, you know, everybody, we're 300 million people with social media, so everybody today has a really strong voice on what should be what. But at the end of the day, it's the government that decides, and I firmly believe in the Constitution. Number one. Number two, every state has different laws, so depending on the state, that's the laws that they decide. And, you know, it's not just Democrats that believe in regulating guns, it's also Republicans. In fact, a law was passed in Pennsylvania which actually tells you if you have an issue at your house, let's say, you know, somebody accuses somebody of hitting them, within 24 hours, the Republicans, it was all sponsored by Republicans and one Democrat, to give up your guns within 24 hours, which
for domestic violence.
which I would agree with many people, Democrats or Republicans, because I'm not here to be Democrat or Republican. I'm here to just give general conversations of everything, because I think what I'm trying to do is talk about education, healthcare, you know, everything that has to do, even the Second Amendment. There are a lot of people who don't believe in it. There are people who do believe in it. But what matters is that you choose who most value your morals, beliefs, and sentiments towards the future of the children in your life. You know, guns, of course, are a very, very touchy subject because so many people have been hurt. But it's not the guns hurting the people, it's the people using their guns to hurt people. So I think more than paying attention to guns, we need to find a way to work and elect government officials that can better help people to use the guns correctly than negatively, right? We've spoken about education, which it's getting cut across the board, and unfortunately, I'm sorry, it's fact. Google it on government.com, .gov, Congress.gov. It's getting cut by Republicans. So if you believe that education should be cut, or if you support H99 or you support 610, which basically cuts education, do it. Vote Republican if you don't. If you think that education is important for your kids and you want them to go to school and, you know, have a great education from college. Our vice president graduated from a public school. We have government officials here in the state of Texas who graduated from public schools. The same education that they received back then, the future children should, and the present children should be able to receive it.
And affordable at that, too.
Of course. And healthcare, healthcare, which is something that I touched about a little bit earlier, which is something very important. I'm not sure if you guys know about it, but I follow bills a lot. And CHIP was actually stalled for a while, and it wasn't approved until right before it was about to expire, right, Lorena?
That's right.
Remember?
That's
yeah,
right.
it was about to expire.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you want to vote for Stephen David, who's going to be running for U.S. House Representative, District 8, he believes in healthcare is a right. And unfortunately, Congress.gov, again, Google it, Kevin Brady, who's also running as a Republican for U.S. House Representative, District 8, voted no on expanding the Children's Health Insurance Program, which is CHIP. And coming from a single mom daughter, she depended on those things, so, and it really helped her economically, you know. I mean, it just helps a lot. It helps in all seriousness and all negativeness, whatever that your life condition may be. we all have problems in our lives, and we shouldn't have to worry about laws that will affect us negatively but positively. All right. And let me ask you guys, what do you guys think? Does anybody here have single parents or parents that had issues with economics? Did you guys, at one point in the past, do you think that in the past, if children had insurance programs and parents had this access, do you guys think that everybody should still have them now and for the future, especially since after 2008, so many people lost jobs? I mean, we had 12 trillion, I think. Was it 12 trillion or billion? Trillion, because Obama had to get a whole bunch of billions to recover that, right?
One of those kids who was a beneficiary of some of the programs that you talked about was the former president.
12 trillion.
His mother was, let's say, when she was in school, not only took advantage of low cost student loans that like Pell Grants and stuff, but so 6 minutes. Okay, she not only took advantage of Pell Grants and stuff. Tuition when I was at the University of Houston back in 1980 was only $4 a credit hour.
Wow.
Okay, so now it's what, 10 times that? Yeah, it's like 10 times that at this point. Affordable college to me is also a critical issue, especially for our younger generation, because they're getting saddled with up to $250K, $350K in debt. And that's before we even start talking about somebody that stays in to do medical school, to go to medical school, or let's say they're taking on even more debt. And that's a drag on our economy when you have somebody graduating from college with that kind of debt.
With what you were saying, with the chip stuff, this is such a bigger issue. And as two people who are running for office, it's not chip, it's not the trans children's bathroom thing, because all these things are political pawns. The chip thing, they literally were holding on to get more. What was that at that time? We had so much drama, but it was something that they were just holding those chips. And then with the trans thing, Obama didn't do that till his last year, and really his last 6 months in office with the trans children public bathroom thing, and so these candidates, and I'm going to call out our friend Mayor Turner, who hasn't reintroduced HERO, and we've heard that maybe he might do it in his last term, but why do we have to, as minorities, as we're all minorities in some sense, why are we always the ones that are being pawned around? And so
in large part because political considerations, because
for sure.
We've got the votes to pass HERO.
Yeah.
We know that.
Yeah.
We know that. But what's going to happen? Our friends on the right are going to immediately go find a Republican judge to go throw it in the court. And the only reason HERO was on the ballot in 2015 was because the Texas Supreme Court had 9 Republican members that put Houston in a position where they either had to put it on the ballot or kill it. So, so I can understand, why they would be reluctant to push,
Sure.
And then we got to go through that same drama again. But I also agree with the fact our human rights can't wait. I agree with you on that.
So basically, even though the reason why I brought you guys here is because I wanted to discuss important subjects that matter through the government bills, through government information and information that please feel free to review for the past hour. I know it's an hour, but maybe I'll do some cuts and post the actual voting, the actual talking points that include these actual bills. Basically, if you believe in one side, hey, these are my values and the future that I want for my children and for me right now, and even in the next 4 years, because this is a term between 2 years and 6 years. So all these candidates that are running in the state in every single part of the country are going to be here between 2 years and 6 years, and 6 years is a long time. As you have seen in the past 3 years, just how the mentality of kids is changing, even from a 6-year-old to a teenager. So, we went over public education, healthcare, jobs, civil rights, everything you can think of. Is there anything that you would like to say to end this,
Choice.
Jay?
What about choice?
Well, I think what I'd like to say to end this, since it is the day before the election, is if you haven't voted, you need to go vote. And
Yes.
if you have voted, you need to make sure every one of your friends and your neighbors has voted. And if they haven't voted, you need to encourage them or take them to the polls and have them vote, because you have a choice. You have a choice of the people that represent you. You have a choice of the type of things you'd like to see when it comes to legislation. In my case, my job's not a legislative job. I mean, my job's about running the business of the county and making sure everyone's represented equally across the board, regardless of where you live or what color you are or anything else. So.
And one
¿Quieres que
last...
lo diga en español?
No, ahorita lo ponemos con subtítulos.
Súper.
Para terminar pronto, porque tenemos un minuto and counting, and I like to talk a lot. We're all women, we all love to talk. I'm over here, I'm sorry we talked over you. Oops.
He's
But
used to it.
I'm used to it. It's okay.
But not only is it, transgender, it's everybody's rights. And I have one last thing to say here, which, if you notice, we didn't touch points on immigration because this is irrelevant. Immigration right now is irrelevant because what matters right now is what's dividing the country, is what is hurting the country. So we just want to clarify that these are the things that matter the most to what's dividing the country. Immigration, even if you decide to get rid of every immigrant in the world, in this country, it's going to be gone, you know what I mean? But these issues are still going to be here. So it was nice seeing you guys. Please, women's rights, one last thing, which we didn't touch on, and I know we're running short on time. Stephen David, we don't have a lot of information on that. He's Democrat, but Republican. It's Kevin Brady. And he voted no on reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act,
VAWA.
which that's really important. All right, WAWA.
VAWA.
VAWA.
Yeah,
We love you guys. Stay tuned for more shows to come. Hopefully, not the whole world hates me for talking about these things, but sometimes the truth can hurt a little bit. But we like to talk about these things. We love you. Bye. See you next time.